I try to adjust the camera more this way because last night, from the other side, speaking of on the other side, remember during the suspension, I said that I was gonna likely read this book next. So if I finish this one with more time tonight, to start Speed of Sound, um, I'll do that. Yeah, I got up today late and I was like, I tend to try to start, like, I don't intend to just completely, my depression, but it always, especially particularly lately, I feel like, I feel pretty hopeless, um, about things. And, um, I always have it in my head that no matter how much of a struggle to fight for you, for the people out there that care about me, I had in my head, like, it's it's painful. It's so painful and burdensome and torturous, and yet you do it for the people that care about you. And it was just occurred to me, like, wait a minute. Doesn't that make it worse for the people that care about you to continue to suffer if you feel like it really won't get better? And I thought, okay, so I just want to start and say, don't, why can't I say it? Giving up anybody caring about me, that's like the biggest thing to give up. Okay, I'm ugly. Like, really? I don't have any makeup on. Do you see this? Let me get closer. Do you see the pimple right there? Well, it's not a pimple anymore. It's just kind of like a mark there. Um, like my skin is like a pasty and ugly. My hair, I'm not worth following. Like, I'm not worth being here right now, okay? Um, I'm not like good at things. I'm not like the worthy of caring about, okay? So if it's better for yourself to like think about that, and I feel like in the overall, like I'm not like helping in the world. I thought I was helping, trying, thought if people care about me and I try my best and keep going, that will help. And I don't know that that's right. But if you insist still right now, tonight, on still caring about me, and there's nothing I can do right now to make you hate me. Although I tried, I put on this dress. It's long. I don't even have heels on. Um, and I saw this dress was on my couch, and I'm like, this is really long. Everyone's gonna really hate me. And I thought, well, this is what I should wear then. Um, what else? I got a paper in the mail from the insurance denying me insurance due to a reporting that I didn't even report. And at first, I'm like angry. I'm like, I hate these people. And it's just like, you know how upsetting it is to hate these people? Like, I don't even care. I don't want to care. Caring hurts when you can't help it, control it, make it any better. You see what I'm saying? But in the meantime, if me being here tonight and reading to you feel is better than the alternative of me not being anymore, I'm here. cherry chopsticks so I can make my coffee over there. You hear about that actor guy? Was it an actor or director that their son killed him? The fuck's up with that? As I will say, men follow through. I can't even throw my chopstick up here correct. I should just throw it back there. No. All right. Finish this book. And the wife too. Was that his mom or just his? Because I know the guy was his dad. Okay. We're on chapter 27. I'm gonna take this with me. I do love you. I can't not love you. I really can't. Because if you ever cared about me, I can't help but like I couldn't help it. I'm really scared every day, terrified. And I've been scared like my whole life, but it's gotten at a point that I feel terrified, hopeless, like suffering, scared about 2026. I am terrified. But I do still love you. I can't stop. But if you could consider looking at me tonight and trying to hate me, that if that's for the best, really try. Just be like, look at her horrible dress. Look at her stupid hair. Really hate her. Really, you know what I mean? If it helps. All right. Just I am Scarlett O'Hara. Where is my hat? Where is I? Feel huh? Southern Nights. Have you ever? I'm pulling you up. Hold on. Ooh. Is it Southern Nights or Summer Night? No, it's Southern. Southern Nights. Like Gone with the Wind. All right. I gotcha. Let's see if we can get a little ashier, happy ever after, huh? Out of all the billions of people who inhabit this planet, Drake and Aisling have found each other and committed to share their lives together as husband and wife. Does Drake count as a people? They're a dragon in a people sort of like costume, you know. They have begun their journey together and have brought us here to celebrate this beautiful moment in that journey. I smiled at Drake. He squeezed the fingers of the hand he was holding. A good marriage is an entity that is made up of love, understanding, intimacy, and a generosity of spirit that allows you to put aside petty differences and care for each other, no matter what the circumstances. Drake and Ashling have vowed to do just that and have asked us here today to witness those vows. The voice of the odd little round man Paula had found echo mm, willing to fit us into his schedule echoed loudly in the small, out of the way chapel. It had taken her 2 weeks to arrange this wedding. And me almost as long to convince her to stay in England to attend it. Our numbers were a lot fewer than the first one. My cousins had long since returned home, and as had David, whose job at an Oregon university demanded his attendance. Most of the green dragons who had gathered in England had also returned to their homes, but a few had shown up as well as my friends. So, why then was a vague sense of alarm starting to prick my awareness? Drake and Ashling, before you, I have placed 3 candles, one each to symbolize your separate selves, and one to symbolize your unity. Please light your separate candles and use them together to light the marriage candle, pledging as you do so to keep your union as bright as the flames of your candles. I wasn't much for the rather dramatic flair the officiating man had, but obediently I lit a candle and then used it to light a larger one with a golden heart embossed on it. Next to me, Paula sniffled happily. This is so beautiful, she whispered. I nodded and used the opportunity to peek over my shoulder at the audience, wondering if I could pinpoint my sense of unease. Pal was in the front with his arm around Nora. They made such a cute couple. Renee sat next to them with a pretty petite red-headed woman of indeterminate age whom he had introduced as his wife Bridget. Isfahan and Suzanne sat on the other front pew alongside Gabriel and his bodyguards. Gabriel caught me peeking and grinned, his dimples flashing. I winked back, grateful he'd come, despite knowing that Kostya would be here. I was even more grateful than that Kostya was on his best behavior. Relations between Drake and him had been strained for 10 days, but finally, just before the wedding, the two of them cleared the air with a rip-roaring fight that left Drake with a broken nose and Kostya with a limp that persisted for 48 hours. True, it didn't end in a political reconciliation, but at least the two brothers were talking to each other again. I had confidence that with time, Drake would be able to make his brother see reason. Jim stepped on my foot. I returned my attention to the man as he went on about renewing our faith in each other and allowing the marriage to breathe with the air of love and support. I tried to pay attention to him, but the vague something was starting to take on a more alarming state. I ran down a mental checklist of everything I had to do and didn't see what it was that would be causing this feeling. What token do you, Drake, offer Ashling as a sign of your commitment to her? Kostya, standing at Drake's side, handed him a platinum ring. I smiled at the sight of it. I'm sorry, I'm sorry for calling. Isn't that the Christmas song? Um, Eartha Kitt's, Santa Baby. Um, but isn't she something to a platinum mine? Yeah, that would be a good song to play at the wedding. I'm just thinking. Drake had told me that gold on my finger would be too distracting and opted to have our rings made of less attractive, to dragons anyway, metal. Do you, Drake, take Ashling to be your wife? Do you pledge to honor and respect her and to live in fidelity and love with her from this day forth? Excuse me, I interrupted, returning to Drake. Something's wrong. Aisling, Paula moaned, not again. A normal man might point out that what was wrong was a woman interrupting her own long-awaited wedding, but Drake was head and shoulders above normal. Instead of asking silly questions, he simply asked me, dangerous? I think so. There's something here that isn't right. Instantly, Pal and Isfin were at his side. Take Ashling's family and the mortals out the side entrance, he told Pal. Isfin, check the street. Kostya, I'll have a look around the chapel, he said, suiting action to word. The sudden breakup of the dragons had Gabriel hurrying up. What's wrong? He asked. Drake filled him in while I turned to the guests and, with an apologetic smile, I said in a loud voice, I seem to have the worst luck with weddings. I'm very sorry to have to do this, but there seems to be a problem with the chapel, and I'm afraid we're going to have to evacuate it quickly. We'll regroup outside until we know the problem is fixed. Ashling, this is the limit. This is the very limit, Paula said, jerking away from where Pal was trying to move her. You will go back in front of that minister and you will let him marry you, or so help me. Well, I don't know what I'll do, but it won't be pleasant. I hated to do it. I really did. But I didn't have time to go reason with her. I swung open the door in my mind and gave her a huge mental push. Paula, you need to leave the building now. It's nothing but a gas leak, but it's dangerous to stay here. You must help the others get out quickly and stay out until it's safe to return. Oh my, she gasped, looking somewhat stunned. A gas leak is dangerous. People, quickly, we must leave immediately. She hurried off to herd people at the door. I'm going to end up frying her brain one day if I keep doing that, I said under my breath. Jim heard me. Do you think anyone would notice? I ignored it as Renee caught my eye. Can I do anything? No, just get your wife out and make sure no one comes back in. He nodded and gave my hand a little squeeze before dashing off to grab his wife and follow the last few people leaving. Aisling, what is it? Nora's voice was quiet but calming. I turned around to find her, but with my enhanced vision turned on, I wasn't so much seeing people as seeing their elemental parts. I'm not sure. Do you feel something? She was silent a moment and then nodded. It's very faint, but yes, there's something here that is imbued with evil. Jim? The demon's warm head pushed under my hand. Where is it, Jim? Can't tell. I wasn't sure there was anything until you started waking me out. I walked blindly down the center aisle of the chapel, searching in the corners and niches for signs of something that wasn't right. What do you guys think it is? Do we have any guesses? What about that lady? Was it like a blonde lady in the beginning, or she was just a guardian? Mhm. Here, Gabriel emerged from one of the back rooms and shouted out his findings. I think it's a bomb. Super devil. Get her out of the building, Drake told his brother, who started toward me at a run, but I knew in a flash that he wasn't going to make it in time. Everything seemed to slow down. Like time itself had telescoped as I flung myself sideways into Nora, knocking her down onto a wooden pew. An explosion tore through the building with a vengeance, the scream of metal, an almost human sound, followed by concussive blast as the windows shattered. Shards of glass and wood and bits of stone rained down upon us. But to my relief, when I looked up, the bulk of the building was still intact, with only the far end having been blown to smithereens. Drake shouting my name relieved my paramount worry. We're here, I yelled, coughing at the dust that resulted from the wall of the Nave being destroyed. Nora, are you all right? I think so. Yes, dear God. Who would bomb a church? Are you hurt? Drake yelled, pulling a large piece of the baptismal font off someone. No, we're okay. Stay back there, he ordered. I pulled off bits of wood and rock off Nora, helping her to sit up. Her hair was white with dust, her glasses broken and hanging askew. I have a pretty good idea that we have some dragons to thank for that, Jim. Right here. You okay? No, I don't seem to be able to feel my back legs, and it's kind of hard to breathe. I crawled out of the shelter of the pews to find Jim lying in the aisle, one of the wooden benches that lined the nave broken on top of it. Oh no, I cried, half crawling over to where it lay. Don't move, we'll get a vet. Dear God, there's so much blood. Drake, Jim's hurt. Oh no. With an effort, Jim lifted its head and turned its eyes toward me, fear stark in their depths. Ash, I don't feel so good. You think I broke my form? I don't know, I told it, cradling its head and brushing grit from its face. But if you did, we'll get you another one just as nice. I don't think there is another one this nice. I'd like to save it if I could. Then that's what we'll do. Nora, can you see my bag anywhere? We need to call the vet's office and let them know we'll be bringing Jim in. Nora picked her way across the debris to me, blood seeping from a couple of cuts in her arms. She started to search the area, froze, then spun around and faced where the nave used to be. The twisted metal and wood and stone were now reduced to nothing more than a gaping hole that spread from the floor up part of the back wall. Tapine and Gabriel were carrying Mata, smeared with blood and dust, to the nearest pew. Drake shouted orders to Kostya and Isvan, the dragons calling back and forth as they investigated the ruined part of the chapel. Ash, Jim's breathing was raspy and labored. Don't tell anyone, but I think I'm a little bit scared. You're not going to leave me, are you? No, I won't leave you, I told it, my tears making little wet marks on its filthy coat. You don't have to be scared. I'm not going to let anything happen to you. Ashling, we have a problem, Nora said quietly, still staring toward the nave. Jim hiccuped a couple of times, its eyes rolling back in its head. Anguish overwhelmed me as I watched him fight. I knew in my head that it was a demon, not a dog, but my heart told me that my friend was dying before my eyes. No, I wailed, as its body twitched and then went limp. God damn it, Jim, I order you to not die. Ashling, you must come with me. Nara's voice pierced my sobbing as I clutched Jim's head, bawling into its neck. Jim's dead. I managed to get out, my body racked with grief so profound I thought it would consume me. Ashley, a sharp, stinging blow to my face, brought me out of the grief for a moment. I stared at Nora in stark disbelief. Jim isn't dead. It can't die. You can summon it again once it picks a new form. Ashling, think. Jim is a demon. They can die. The body is broken, that's all. I looked down at the furry black form and saw the truth of what she was saying. The body wasn't all of Jim. It was the outer shell, nothing more. We must go. Drake, do not go in there. Something terrible has happened, Nora urged. Jim is going to be so pissed, I said slowly, allowing Nora to pull me to my feet. As I spoke the words, rage filled me, rage at whoever would do something so heinous as to arrange for a bomb to go off where innocent people and demons could be harmed. Fire broke out around me. Come, Nora said, taking my hand and urging me down the aisle toward the gaping hole. We are needed. I mean, I'm sure people have bombed a church before. I'm thinking of the scene. Was it the scene in The Patriot? Was that a wedding or just like a church service? It was really sad. A jealous ex. I'm thinking it's the Red Dragons, maybe, because they said that they're still not getting along, right? Although it could be somebody more emotional. Although the Red Dragon, she is an ex, but what about his mother? She wasn't there. She was an angry woman. Mm, okay. Come, Nora said, taking my hand and urging me down the aisle toward the gaping hole. We are needed. Her words penetrated the dense fog of my fury. I stumbled down the aisle after her, mentally squelching the fires I had inadvertently lit. Needed how? Can't you feel it? She asked, skirting where Gabriel was working over Mata. Is she going to be okay? I asked him, cringing at the sight of Mata's injuries. Yes, dragons are strong, he said, giving me a weak smile. Mata is the strongest of us all. I nodded and followed after Nora as she skirted a pile of debris and stepped over what remained of a mostly destroyed wall. What are you doing here? Drake asked, crouched at the hole in the floor. He was clearly planning on jumping down into it. I told you to stay back where it was safe. In about 30 seconds, this church is going to be filled with imps, demons, and who knows what else, Nora said, taking off her stained suit jacket. His eyes widened as his gaze moved to me. Jim was crushed by one of the benches, I told him, tears still sticky on my cheeks. You will get it back, he said, before turning to Nora. A portal has opened? Yes, a very old one, by the feel of it. I will need Ashling to help me seal it. It's too dangerous. Kostya is down there now. He says there's an old crypt below the chapel. I can't do this alone, Nora said. Rummaging in her bag, she pulled out a small pink flashlight that she tucked into her shirt pocket before squatting on the edge of the hole, clearly about to jump into it. But, oh God, Nora, there wasn't time to tell you. I can't help you, I wailed, my heart breaking even more. I wish to God I could, but I can't. Don't be ridiculous. I know you've not sealed a portal on your own before, but no, it's not that. I looked at Drake, his lovely eyes blurred as my own filled with tears again. I would help you if I could, but I'm not a guardian anymore. You're what? She asked, shaking her head abruptly. We do not have time for this. There are only a few minutes before the seal on that portal is breached, and then all hell will break loose, literally. I disavowed being a guardian, I yelled, clutching her arm and shaking it so she'd understand. That was the sacrifice that Baal demanded. Don't you see? I'm not a guardian anymore. I can't help you. Don't be ridiculous. No one can make you stop being a guardian. It's something you're born to do. Vows have nothing to do with it. I thought my head would explode with astonishment. They can't? Then why would Baal? He's a demon lord, she snapped, swinging her legs over the edge. Drake jumped down into the hole. It was about 12 feet deep, but he called up for her to ease herself down to his grasp. But if you aren't a guardian, how did you know the bomb was here? You sensed it long before I did, Ashling. You were born a guardian, and you'll be a guardian to the end of your days. Now, please, I do not have the abilities you have. You must help me. The truth washed over me like a cold wave, leaving me scrambling after her. Drake stood on a stone tomb, grabbing my legs as I slid myself down into the hole. I do not like this, he said, keeping me down off the tomb and onto a debris-covered floor. I have a torch, Nora said. This way, Ashling. I touched a small cut on his cheek. I know, but I can't leave Nora alone. I am a guardian after all. His fingers squeezed mine in acknowledgement as we followed the bobbing light. Kostya emerged from a side passage, taking up the rear. "This is not a good situation," he said. "We will do the best we can," Drake answered. A feeling of dread seemed to leach off the walls and into my pores as we passed tomb after tomb, many of them partially broken. Bones scattered across the floor. A faint glow of light pierced the darkness ahead, the weak circle from Nora's flashlight jerking before it came to an abrupt stop. "Oh dear," I heard her say. Drake's fingers tightened as he pulled me behind him. Kostya pushed his way past us both, his silhouette blocking most of the soft yellow light that seemed to pour out of a small doorway cut into the stone. "Chuan Ren," Kostya said, moving aside when Drake gave him a shove. The name hung on the air for a moment. All my anger and frustration, all of my sorrow and rage came back to me at the sight of the woman standing across a small room lit with portable camp lights. She was behind this. She had killed Jim's form. She had blown up a chapel full of innocent people in her attempt to destroy us, and she would not stop until she succeeded. In the middle of the floor lay a circle created from dusty beige stone, its carvings so obliterated with time that they were almost impossible to make out. But I knew that what I was looking at was a sealed portal, but the seal on this one had been cracked. A piece of lid, a stone lid from one of the tombs laying across it, no doubt knocked there by the force of the explosion above. A greenish black light glowed outward through the cracks, gaining strength with every passing second. Beyond it, 7 people stood. Chuan Ren was flanked on either side by 3 dragons, none of whom was her mate. I noted absently. I felt oddly relieved. I kind of liked Lee, despite the fact that his mate was a homicidal maniac. "You found us at last," Chuan Ren said, glancing at her watch. 7 minutes. I had expected you to find me too. "I had other things of importance to concern me," Drake said, with deceptive mildness. "Well, you're right. She is technically an ex, so I give you that." What 3 girls? There's Jim. What what 3? There's Nora, Ashling. They seem to be okay. Okay, sorry. 2 minutes. Okay. I could feel how tense and on edge he was, as if he was poised to attack. "This portal seal has been compromised," Nora said, stepping forward to wave at the broken stone circle. "I must seal it immediately, or it will be opened permanently." Chuan Ren smiled at Nora, pulling out 2 wicked-looking curved swords. "I think not, Guardian. A portal right here will suit me very well." "Why?" I asked, squeezing between Kostya and Drake so I could see the seal better. Nora was right. The feeling of dread was coming from the portal, and it was increasing greatly with each breath I took. It was clearly about to break. And when it did, I refused to think of how many people would die in London alone if dark beings could pass through it at will. Why do you want a portal open? It can't harm the green dragons. Her red lips curved into a cruel smile. It can harm you, Ashlyn Gray. I'm a mortal, I reminded her. You can be killed. All I have to do is seal the portal, if not now, at some later date. Her smile widened. I heard you were no longer a guardian. How will you seal it? Been talking to Baal, have you? Well, you heard wrong. I answered, giving her a cold little smile of my own. I'm still a guardian, and I'm very, very angry. And guess who I'm angry at? She tossed her head. You are nothing. I have told you before, Chuan Ren. You will address me and not my mate, Drake said, as he moved to my side. She has nothing to do with what is between us. Threats to her are meaningless. Everything is going to be meaningless unless Ashling and I close this portal. You may argue all you want, but I have a job to do. Nora took 2 steps forward and lifted both hands, clearly about to start the sealing process. 2 of the red dragons jumped forward, their blades flashing. Kostya leaped into action, throwing himself in front of Nora as the dragons descended. Seal it, Drake commanded, as he too ran forward. Chuan Ren, we will settle this here and now. Meet me body to body. Oh, is he going to hit a woman? Dragon lady. She laughed, her eyes glowing. With a red light that never failed to give me the willies. Do you think I will be so easily beaten as the last time you challenged me, Drake? This ends now, he said, removing his tux jacket. I didn't have time to do more than draw a ward of protection on him, as Chuan Ren laughed again and tossed him one of the blades she was holding. Yes, I believe it will end now. I will greatly relish destroying you, as well as your mate and your unborn child. Drake snarled something and lunged toward her, the force of their blades meeting, generating a tiny blue spark. The other 4 dragons started toward me, but I was ready for them. Jim, I summon thee in whatever form is handy, I yelled, my hands drawing lightning fast binding wards. The 4 dragons snarled as at my feet a small Scottish terrier appeared. Jim? I asked, momentarily taken aback. Familiar eyes looked up at me, easing the pain that had held my heart in such a tight grip. Fires of Abaddon, Ash. I wasn't done picking a form. I was just looking at this one. Oh man, I'm a midget. Chapter 28. Oh, but Scotties are so cute, the little Scotty dogs. I used to have a Scotty dog purse. It was like popular. Oh my god, it wasn't like expensive. But it was like a handbag or the crook of your arm with like it looked like a Scotty with the little they got like a mustache. They don't look a mutt like you, Fila. No, because Scotties are also I think it's probably Scotties are often black. They could be brown. Attack! I ordered Jim, pointing at the 4 dragons. It stared at me in horror. Are you kidding? Attack with what? My stubby little teeth? I can nip at their ankles if you think that'll help. Yeah, attack Scotty. Yeah, is that what Dorothy? Oh. Mm. Drake spat out an oath as he leaped on top of a tomb, blood spilling out of a cut across his chest. Chuan Ren followed him, screaming something unintelligible. Oh, for God's sakes! Why didn't you pick a Great Dane or something? I yelled, running over to slap a binding ward. on one of the two dragons who were beating the crap out of Kostya. Nora slammed a piece of stone down on the other one's head, causing him to reel backwards. We must seal it, Aisling, she cried, closing her eyes and starting to sketch the series of words of adjournment that were used to seal portals. I don't care what you do, just do something, I ordered Jim, opening the door in my mind as a piece of the stone seal exploded inward or upward. Imps, small, orange in color, and accompanied by a repulsive smell, started to pour out of the broken seal. Jim bounded over, snarling as it attacked the imps. Behind me, a man shouted. A dark figure flashing past me as Ispan leaped over Jim and the imps, tackling the foursome, who I feared were about to break out of the binding ward. Wards don't last as long on dragons as they do on people, and mine had been hastily drawn. Hal raced into the room, glanced quickly at Nora and me, and took in the sight of Drake leaping from tomb to tomb as he fought John Wren, their blades flashing in the light of the imps. Kostya doing battle with the other two dragons. He gave a yell and joined the fray with Ispan just as the ward gave free. I tried desperately to clear my mind of the chaos around us, focusing on the axe needed to seal the portal. Another chunk of the seal exploded, leaving a hole in it about 2 feet across. Ash, I'm going to need some help here, Jim yelled, its body covered in imp blood as it attacked the fresh wave of tiny orange beings. I pulled on Drake's fire and blasted the entrance of the portal with it, incinerating the imps and stopping their flow for a moment. Nora drew words of adjournment, but as soon as they were drawn, they dissolved into nothing. What's wrong? I yelled across the portal to her. This portal is too old. It has too much power. My words aren't strong enough. I fear we're going to have to call for help with it. You go get help. I'll try to keep it contained until you get back, I said grimly. She nodded, racing past me and out the door. I closed my eyes for a moment as I gathered up every negative emotion I felt in the last few weeks. The attacks by the Red Dragons, Fiat's evil plots, Kostya's stubborn insistence, the pain Baal had deliberately caused me, and thankfully brief grief of losing Jim all roiled together in my gut, churning within me until I allowed it to merge with Drake's fire. Ash, it's going to blow, Jim cried, shaking an imp until the little form hung limp in its jaws. You're going to have to seal it now. The remainder of the seal exploded upward with a tremendous blast, sending me staggering backwards. Me, Drake bellowed. I'm all right, I yelled back at him as he twisted just in time to avoid a beheading. Just take care of her. The clash of their swords merged into the chaos of noise from the dragons as they fought around us. I stared with horror at the black abyss that lay open at my feet and knew with absolute conviction that Nora would not make it back in time. I had to seal the damn thing. Imps leaped out of the portal, singed and blackened by the dragon fire, their teeth needle sharp as they snapped up my legs. I had to seal the damn thing now. Need a little help here, Jim snarled, its teeth clamping shut on another imp. Isfin, Pal shouted, going down under a pile of red dragons that suddenly appeared at the door of the crypt. I pulled hard on Drake's fire, blasting the portal just as the demon stuck its head out. Aisling, close it, Jim cried. Behind me, Kostya, Isfan, and Pal flung themselves forward at the incoming red dragons. I didn't wonder at Kostya helping to fight them. I didn't have time to do anything but focus on keeping the wave of incoming horror from escaping the portal. It wouldn't work. I wasn't strong enough. I couldn't do this without the dark power. Like hell, he can't. I can't. I growled at my doubts, spreading wide my arms and yelling at the top of my lungs. Fettered and fastened, I bury you deep. Oh man, you've been reading the Merseburg incantations, Jim said, spitting out a bit of imp. That's kind of old, Ash. The portal is old. It will recognize the power of the binding. Blood bound to stone, so you will keep. The red dragon swarmed over Pal and Isfet. Koster was using one of their swords against them, but he was quickly being overwhelmed. Rick shouted as Tuan Ren knocked him backwards, leaving him vulnerable. I flung a fireball at her, knowing it wouldn't do her any damage, but it contained enough power to upset her balance. She spun around toward me, screaming at her men. The portal, I yelled above the cacophony to Drake. Come to the portal. The red sins of man to my fire be bound. Ah, Jim screamed as it went down in a wave of imps. Not again. Darkness below, life above will resound. 3 red dragons leaped toward me. I flung a binding ward at them and jumped across the portal to the far side. They're going for Ashling, Kostia shouted as he fell under a wave of dragons. I hadn't been sure if Drake had heard me or not, but at Kostia's cry, he screamed with rage, a noise that sounded more like the roar of an enraged animal than anything a human can make. He threw a handful of dirt at Chuan Ren's face, vaulted to the top of a tomb, and leaped over the heads of the struggling dragons to land a few feet away. The portal, I yelled, pointing at it. The dragon fire was dying away. Behind it, dark forms writhed, and I knew that I had a matter of seconds before they would burst out. He nodded and twisted sideways, anticipating Chuan Ren's attack. She leaped off the same tomb he had used, but he was several inches taller than her. He grabbed her in midair, spinning them both sideways as he flung himself to the ground. Chuan Ren screamed as she fell into the portal. Bone to bone, blood to blood, fire to life, so you are sealed. I shouted, my voice hoarse, as I drew one last word on the portal. The instant the sentence left my lips, a crack of thunder exploded around us. The shock wave knocking everyone backwards. Echoes of the explosion rang in my ears, leaving me disoriented and confused for several seconds. But at last, the various noises resolved themselves into separate sounds, most of them recognizable. One in particular had my breath catching in my throat. Kinsem, Ashling! I opened my eyes to the glorious sight of Drake's concerned face, bloodied, battered, but whole. Did it work? The portal is sealed. Do not move. You could be injured. Do you hurt anywhere? Yeah, I said, shifting to the side. It's my back. There's something. Oh, God, I landed on an amp. Drake didn't even grimace as I wiped my imp hand on his sleeve. Do not try to sit up. You could have injuries. I laughed, much to Drake's shock. Sweetie, I'm a tough cookie. It's going to take more than being knocked onto an imp. Ew, a pile of imps. My God, my whole back is covered in imp goo. Ugh. Be thankful they were there, he answered, frowning as it's better than incubus goo. No, sorry. I got confused for a second with the incubus. Incubi? Jerry, are you okay? What's wrong? Her water breaks. Yeah, I feel like that's about all that's left, right? So, I don't know how many imps there were, but there were squashed flat into an ashling-shaped mound, the sight of which I doubted I'd forget soon. I demand a shower, but I guess we have a few dragons to take care of, I said as he helped me over a chunk of falling tomb. To my amazement, the room was empty of red dragons. Where did they all go? Drake understood what I was asking. They left as soon as they saw Chuan Ren go into the portal. You're kidding. They just turned tail and ran? He shrugged. My dragons would not run if I fell, but the red dragons, they're different. Bunch of weenies, I muttered, taking a quick look around to assess the damage. Pal sat next to Isfan, whose arm hung at an unnatural angle. Kostya stood at the portal, an odd expression on his face. You threw Chuan Ren into Abaddon, he said finally. You sealed her in there. It seemed like too good an opportunity to miss, I said, as Drake and I picked our way over to the portal. I looked with no little amount of pride at the stone circle once again intact, the wards glowing with faint golden auras. You know how the saying goes, play stupid games, end up doomed in a hell portal in Abaddon. Two birds with one stone, if you'll excuse the unintended pun. I'd say I'm sorry that it messes up your plans for getting into the where Kostya, but to be perfectly honest, I'm not at all sorry. I don't know if Abaddon can hold Chuan Ren, but assuming it does, I'm thrilled that she's out of our hair. Gabriel appeared at the door, Tapine at his side. Are you all right? There was a horrible explosion. Half the chapel came down. Is Mata all right? I asked, concerned. Yes, we had moved her out before the second wall came down. What has been happening here? He and Tapine gawked at the sight of destruction. I had to close a portal. Chuan Ren kind of got in the way of it, fell in. His gawking changed to an outright goggle of astonishment. She what? It's a bit of a long story, one which you will tell later. Sit, Drake ordered, pointing to a convenient piece of stone. Sweetie, I'm fine. Sit. I sat, smiling to myself as he quickly explained what had happened to Gabriel. I smiled through the quick examination he insisted Gabriel conduct on me, and I was still smiling when a half hour later we made our way out of the crypt and up into the relatively fresh air of London. Nora met us as we skirted the destroyed chapel. Emergency crews had the area cordoned off, but several ambulances were pulled up next to the remains of the building. Have you seen Paula and my uncle? I asked Nora as she rushed toward me. A familiar man was at her side. Evidently, Nora had. Oh dear. I spilled one of my coffees. Not a big deal, but. Okay. Hmm. Your family is fine, she said, giving me a hug. Everyone is. Renee got everyone away from the church before the first bomb blew. Oh, there were multiple. I had no idea there was a second one, but I can't tell you how worried I was that it had, but you're here. And now I'm going to embarrass us both by weeping. You're not going to be the only one, I said, tearing up as I hugged her. Drake murmured something about being right back and went to help Hal take Ispen to the ambulance. I smiled at the man next to Nora. I'm sorry, Mr. Batiste, but you're bound to think us a couple of silly women. On the contrary, my opinion of you both holds nothing but admiration. Look at there. Wet. Okay. I shook my head. That wasn't a second bomb. It was the reverb from the portal ceiling. His brown eyes widened slightly at my words. Nora gasped. Ashling, you didn't. Yeah. I used a variation on the Merceberg incantations. I figured if the portal was so old that normal words and spells wouldn't work on it, then something with a bit more age might, and it worked. Good Lord, she said, glancing at the head of the guild. He was silent for a moment, his eyes examining me carefully. My happy glow of success faded as I wondered if I had done something horribly wrong. I wish to be sure I understand the situation completely. You closed the portal. No, I sealed it. There's a difference, right? Closing means it can be opened again from the Abaddon side, and sealing means it can't. They both nodded. Okay, I said, relieved. I was worried I had it wrong. The portal is sealed. The big round stone seal that sat on top of it was reforged when I spoke the incantation. I tossed on a couple of wards just to give it a little extra oomph, and they were there when I left. You sealed the portal, Caribbean Baptiste repeated. Yes, I have a horrible feeling what you're going to tell me is I've done something wrong. Wasn't I supposed to seal it? No, he answered. My heart fell. He shook his head. I misspoke. Yes, you should have sealed it, but no, you should not have been able to seal it. You were an apprentice when you left the guild. Am I correct in thinking you've had no formal training in the care of portals? Mm. You are correct. There was no time for me to do more than show her the portal I guard, Nora said. There was a glint of laughter in her eyes, and something else, something warm and fuzzy, that looked a whole lot like pride. I've been through a lot lately, I told him, suddenly wanting to be near Drake. I guess it all just kind of came together, if you'll excuse me. I've got a wyvern to reassure. You have a wyvern to wed, a voice said behind me. I turned, and Drake smiled. Like the hand he held out to me, he was bloodied and filthy, his shirt dark red with blood from various slashes across his chest. Next to him stood Gabriel, less damaged but just as dirty. I think maybe we're going to have to wait on the wedding idea. I don't think I can mind push Paula again without driving the poor woman insane. And it's going to take her a long, long time to forgive me for that last attempt. We will work that out later. Right now, we have a wedding to attend, he insisted. I looked at the destroyed mess of a chapel. I never told you what I did before I was made wyvern, did I? Gabriel asked, his dimples dimpling like crazy. I was ordained in several faiths, any of which would allow me to marry you two. My laughter startled a nearby pigeon that had settled on a mound of debris. The bird flew into the air, flapped around us a few times, then resettled itself and watched with bright, interested eyes. Drake raised his eyebrows. Shall we? Hell yes! There's no way I'm going to wait for another wedding. We found a relatively quiet corner, one that was momentarily empty of the emergency crews, police, and bystanders who milled around the remains of the chapel. There, covered in dirt, blood, and ink guts, perched as best we could on a pile of rubble and debris, with only Nora and Caribbean Batiste as witnesses, Drake and I were finally married. Congratulations, Nora said a minute later when the quick ceremony was over. a delighted look on her face. Mazel tov, said Caribbean Batiste, beaming. Gabriel's dimples flashed warmly. It was Drake's who wholly held my attention. His eyes were filled with love as he smiled down at me, happy now. Yes, but I could be more happy, I said, rubbing a smudge of dirt off his cheek, laughing at the surprised look that flashed in the depths of his emerald eyes. The imp goo is starting to dry and is itching like crazy. Take me home, husband. I can't believe you got married without me. I've apologized a dozen times already, Jim. I'm sorry I didn't summon you so you could see us married, although, to be honest, it took all of 2 minutes, and then the police descended on us. Drake dragged me off to see my doctor. I can't believe you sealed the portal without me. Yeah, well, Nora seems to think that means something, but, I think it's all part of being a guardian. Mm. And speaking of that, is it wrong? I wonder to hope Chuan Ren is harassing the hell out of Bao. Jim lolled over on its back and presented a hairy belly to be rubbed. I can't believe you were covered in imp gore and I missed it. Hey, what do you think of my package? Is it bigger than the old one? I think it is. I gotta remember to tell Cecile I got a new form in case she notices the difference between this one and the last. I obligingly scratched Jim's belly and purposely did not look at its nether parts. I'm just glad you went with another Newfie. I don't think I could have gotten used to you as any other dog. Newfies rock, it said, kicking its back legs when I hit a ticklish spot. Hey, Drake! Uncle Damien! My uncle made a face at Jim as it entered the living room at Drake's heels. Does it have to call me that? Oh, I think it's cute, I said, grabbing my pillow and down comforter and scooting a few feet down the couch so Drake could sit next to me. He hauled me over his lap, tucking the blanket around my legs. How do you feel? He asked, a familiar glint in his eyes. Fine, better than fine, perfect, which the doctor confirmed, so you can stop treating me like an invalid. A little tendril of smoke drifted out of one of his nostrils. I pursed my lips and blew a perfect heart-shaped ring of fire. You've been practicing, he said, admiring it. That's not the only thing I've been practicing, I answered with a wicked wiggle of my eyebrows. Passion, love, and interest all came to life in his eyes. Oh, yeah, it's going to be a steamy jungle lovin' time, Jim said, rolling over. Out, I told it, nibbling on Drake's lower lip as I pointed over his shoulder to the door. Oh, man, I missed all the other good stuff. You can't make me miss this, too. Out. Jim grumbled all the way to the door. Fine, be that way, but I'm going to call Emily and talk to Cecile. And you better not complain at all about the phone charges. When I think of what I went through for you, losing a perfectly good form, although I got to admit, having a bigger package is going to rock. The door closed on the demon's comments. I thought I'd check in before I left, but I see there's nothing to concern myself about, Uncle Damien said, his voice gruff, but as near a smile as I've ever seen on his face. I take it there's no word on that red wyvern. No. The light in Drake's eyes dimmed a bit. We don't know for sure what has happened. The Sept has called a conclave in Beijing. I'm assuming it's to name a new wyvern. But we won't know for certain until one of them contracts the weir. Uncle Damien nodded. That porn star, he's gone to ground too? Oh, fiat, I said, sliding my arms between Drake and the couch. No one's heard from him, although he's apparently convinced almost half the Blue Sept that he's the rightful leader. Bastion's having a real struggle coping, but he seems confident that he'll be able to pull them back together. And now that Drake has formally remated me, I don't have to worry that Fiat will try to reclaim me. Good, Uncle Damien said. That leaves only Kostya as the remaining troublesome dragon, and I glanced at Drake, well, despite everything, he's going to go forward with his plan to gain an official spot at the weird table. Will you support him? Uncle Damien asked Drake. His hands were warm under the blanket, stroking my thigh. I would like to think that our septs will once again support one another, but much of that depends on Kostya. Uncle Damien was silent for a moment. I knew he wasn't too fond of Kostya, despite the fact that he'd helped us with the Red Dragons, and I expected he was just keeping quiet out of respect for Drake's feelings, but he surprised me when he said finally, give him time, he's still suffering from being imprisoned. I did a spell as a POW. You never really forget that. He may come around yet. That's my hope, Drake agreed. Yes, well, Uncle Damien looked vaguely embarrassed and cleared his throat. I'll be on my way. I'm glad to see you so happy, Ashling. Drake, if you don't take care of my girl, you'll have me to answer to. You'll have me to answer to, too, and that's a whole lot scarier, I told my uncle. Kissing the cheek, he leaned down to present. Call me when you get home, so I know your flight landed okay. He nodded. Drake started to move me off his lap in order to see my uncle to the door, but he waved him back. You stay there and make sure my niece is well as she says she is. You'll come and visit us and see the baby, won't you? I asked. Wouldn't miss it. Be well, Ashling. Love you, I called, covering Drake's ear so I wouldn't deafen him. Now then, husband mine, I believe you were going to give me a thorough examination to make sure that I was, in fact, just as delectable as you found me before the wedding. The fire was back in his eyes. What form would you prefer this examination take, Kinsa? I was thinking a full body exam, perhaps in the tub with that spicy frankincense oil you used. What do you think of that, dragon of my dreams? I don't think you're going to have the energy to dream tonight, Drake answered, hoisting me up as he got to his feet, the burn of his lips almost as hot as the burn he started within me. Is that a threat or a promise? I asked, licking his lower lip. Both. I smiled to myself as he carried me up the stairs to our bedroom. Make me burn, baby, make me burn. And is the end of our series. Although, apparently she says here, if you'd like to read more about Drake's life before he met Ashley, be sure to check out Dragon Revisited. Jim's backstory can be found in Becoming Ever Jim. Want more? Join our newsletter. But I like that ending because it reminds me of that scene in Gone with the Wind where Rhett Butler takes her upstairs because she's like, oh, yeah, they're at the table, they had that fight, and I thought it was sexy, but it might have also been assault. I'm not sure. she was happy the next day, and then he left her. But either way, he carried her upstairs. That is our end of our fantasy dragon stories. But let's go to the real world. Let's go to a real this world story in our book titled The Speed of Sound, Breaking the Barriers Between Music and Technology from Thomas Dolby, a memoir. Let me take off my dust jacket. I messaged you several times from past shows recently. Oh, you mean comments? I do try to check them. Yeah, do you go back and read your past? Yes, I do. Yes, thank you. I do. Although not everything gets through, possibly because I have it on for strict moderation, which means I wouldn't see it. It would just automatically decline. I'm not declining anything. I mean, I haven't removed any comments or anything. I don't know what their standards are. If you have like a peach emoji, I don't know. Oh, thank you, Jerry. Okay, so I thought we started the prologue on the other site, but I don't know if that's necessary. Let's see. I think it's just a little. Yeah, let's start at part 1. Chapter 1, The Winter of Discontent. Just catching your comments so I'm up to date when I start here. Yeah. Y'all so cute. Okay. Mr. Ron Grigson said the door of his fruit and vegetable shop had to stay open all day so customers would walk in off the street. This was February, so it was as bloody freezing inside as it was out. Customers were a rarity anyway. Kensington Church Street, with its art galleries and high-end leather handbag boutiques, is a stupid place to have a fruit and veg shop. When I got there at 10 every morning to work the lunchtime shift, Grigson would trot over the road to the pub and drink till it closed at 3. Brian Jones and I used to stay warm with a periodic game of turnip football. Is that a thing, Terry? Turnip football? Well, actually, it'd be more like turnip soccer, right? It has to be a small one. You boot it around the floor using the legs of the fruit stands as goals. The average turnip lasts about 10 minutes, then it's too bruised and beaten up, so into the gutter it goes and you swap it for a fresh one. I was beating Brian 11-8, but we had to stop because a posh lady came in for a pound of Fuji apples. Gregson got back a little after 3, completely sloshed. He went right to the till and checked the cash. Seemed he'd bumped into the apple lady, and she complained that the boys in his shop were messing around. Gregson was constantly grumbling that his shop didn't make a profit, and always looking for someone to blame. He usually took it out on Brian because he thought Brian was a bit dense. Brian was 19, a year older than me, and had spiky black hair like Sid Vicious in the Pistols. He'd left school at 15. He worked long hours with Gregson, riding the van to market early in the morning to load the day's stock. He knew I read the NME and had a music O level, and he was curious to pick my brains. Brian wanted to learn the bass guitar because he said Sid was rubbish, and he reckoned he could do a better job. I told him I could show him the basics, but he was going to have to think up a better stage name, as Brian Jones was taken. He failed to see the significance of this. Anyway, Gregson was back now, and he went off to a drunken rant about the young people today. Brian and I grinned and made faces at each other behind his back. When I asked Gregson for my wages, he muttered something under his breath about on his staff. He zeroed at the till again and grudgingly handed me my. I'm going to say that is it a pound, right? £3 and 50 or 3.5. I don't know if you say cents in English. Sorry, foreigners. That was my daily wage. Some days I would also take home a bag of discount veggies, but today, as I knew the bastard would charge me my top whack. Not today, yeah. The only good thing about my job at the shop was that I could go in late and leave early, avoiding the rush hour traffic. I caught the number 28 bus to Wandsworth, got off near the Young's Brewery, and walked home to Putney from there. There was a wicked wind coming off the Thames, but I chose to walk along the river anyway. There were a few interesting little one-story shops down there, and I liked to peer in the windows. One was the EMS synthesizers. Why they had their workshop in my little backwater of London, I had no idea. In their window, there were a couple of their machines displayed at odd angles on a piece of cloth. They made amazing synths, like the one Pink Floyd used all over Dark Side of the Moon. EMS made a synth that was built into a suitcase with a matrix of little pins in it, like a game of cribbage. It cost £2,500. I can't imagine they sold many to passerby. If you peered into the back of the shop, you could see people fiddling around the workbenches. It was like something out of Dickens, but in a weird, twisted time warp. On the walk up the hill, I mused on the coincidences. Funny how the little street their shop was on was called Florian Road. One of my favorite synth players was Florian from Kraftwerk. He and his band barely ever left Germany, but they wrote a track called Franz Schubert, and I lived on Schubert Road. I knew Brian Eno had an EMS too, and he used it on Low by David Bowie. Mm, mm. One of the best albums ever. The first side had actual pop hit singles on it, like Sound and Vision, but many of the songs were made entirely with electronic instruments, not your typical guitars and drums. The whole side, too, had hardly got any vocals on it at all. Bowie had balls to take a risk like that. Big, wobbly elephant balls of steel. God, you guys talk so weird. British people. Later on, I met up with Brian from work to go see a band at the Railway Arms in Putney. He read in the record Mirror that they were punk rockers from Newcastle, and he was mad for anything punk. They were called the Police. They were pretty good, but nobody really understood what punk was. As far as I could tell, any band that didn't have long hair or flared trousers was a punk rock band. Afterward, we took some cans back to Brian's basement and I showed him how to tune his crappy electric bass. He'd bought it out of the back of an exchange in Mart for a tenner. It was a Japanese copy, and the round wound strings were rusty and wouldn't stay in tune. I don't think Brian really noticed. I taught him the notes for Pretty Vacant by the Sex Pistols, and he was well pleased with that. He took his shirt off and gazed at himself in the mirror. 10-pound bass guitar slung down below his hips. The next day I got fired from the shop. Gregson came back early from the pub and caught me climbing into the cellar of the antique shop next door. Down in the basement where he kept his old orange crates, there was this wooden shutter. I was waiting for the kettle to boil to make tea, and I got curious and lifted the shutter off its hinges. There was a high up window opening, and in the half light beyond, I could see this musty cellar full of curious shapes. I called to Brian to come and see. We talked in a hush. Are you going in then, or am I? Said Brian, grinning. Yeah, all right, I said. It wasn't like me, I suppose. It was the thrill of it, the dare. I'd never stolen anything in my life, and wasn't about to. Brian gave me a leg up to the narrow entrance, and I dropped down onto the stone floor, kicking up a cloud of dust, sliced through by rays of sunlight from the grate. There were stacks of oil paintings and gilt frames, old clocks, chests of drawers half covered in canvas, and brass knickknacks. Brian was watching from the window opening, but suddenly he said, "Shh." He had this terrified look on his face, and his head spun around. Oh, thank you, Rob. Mm. Gregson was clomping about in the shop above, shouting angrily down at us. Brian went hiring upstairs, and I could hear them arguing, but I couldn't get back through the window easily. There was no foothold. I heard Gregson's heavy boots coming down the wooden steps. He caught me on my stomach, half in, half out of the opening, covered in cobwebs and rat droppings. I looked at him guiltily, expecting a drunken onslaught. Instead, he just turned slowly around and walked back up the stairs. Once I'd brushed myself off, I took a deep breath and followed him up the shop. He had his back to me, sorting avocados in a rack. Did you take anything? He said quietly. No. Then get out. Don't suppose there's much point in asking for my, silence. I caught Brian's eye as I left the shop. He gave a faint, helpless shrug. Been down at the riots, then? I asked one of the two lanky skinheads wedged next to me in the front seat. I hopped aboard when they slid open the door of their Ford Transit as it slowed for the traffic light at North End Road. Riots? Yeah, we've been down Lewisham all day. chucking bricks at the coppers, kicking heads in. We're all home for our tea now. Back down Lewisham again later. It was nice of them to give me a lift, but now I eyed them suspiciously and wondered if they were the National Front, and whether they thought I was too. I jumped out near Hammersmith Tube Station just as it was starting to turn from a drizzle to a proper downpour, hustling down the steps into the underpass. I felt heavy raindrops mixed with pigeon shits from the rooftops, dripping down the collar of my ex-army greatcoat. Maybe that's why they picked me up. It must have been quite hard to tell us apart from behind in those days. It was Saturday afternoon, and London was crawling with punks, skinheads, mods, football thugs, and electro boys like me. Cropped hair, torn trousers, tattoos, standing around on street corners, chugging tenants lager or picking at kebabs and greasy paper. I just had enough for the bus fare to Putney Bridge. That was the last of my cash. Back at my bedside, I decided the only thing to do was to telephone the aged parents from the phone box on the landing. I wanted to know if they could lend me some money as I'd lost my job. Didn't tell them why I'd lost it, of course. Not much sympathy there. Look, we told you if you're definitely not going to go to university, you've just got to support yourself. Look for another job, for heaven's sake. I left high school at the age of 17. I was 2 years ahead of the rest of my class in Abingdon, but I had zero interest in studying and no desire to go to university. My only ambition was to make it in music, and London was beckoning. They never said so, but my parents knew my parents had half my but I knew my parents had half wanted me to follow in their footsteps and become an academic. My dad was an expert in classical archaeology and a Cambridge professor, like his dad and his grandfather before him. My mother taught algebra for years. No one in our family had ever met anybody connected with show business. Not surprisingly, they were dubious when I talked about my plans to make a living as a musician. I loved my family, but they had never even heard me play or sing, so why would they believe me? My parents told me they'd cover me if I got desperate, but I tried to make do. Then they hung up. I was a bit gutted as I'd been planning to go and see Elvis Costello at the Nashville Rooms in West Kent. People were not quite sure if he was punk rock either, but he was starting to get lots of play on John Peel's late night radio show. So I decided to go down to the Nashville in the late afternoon. If I helped the roadies hump gear, maybe I could get on the guest list. I hung around the stage door, pushing flight cases up the ramp, and in the end, a bloke called Simon agreed to get me in. Just tell that ugly bouncer at the front, Jake Riviera, said it was okay. Elvis Costello was brilliant. The band was sharp as hell, with Elvis on his Telecaster, a guy on a tinny box Continental organ, and a reggae-ish rhythm section. After a couple of tracks, people knew from the radio he said he was going to play some brand new songs, and launched into this amazing thing called Watching the Detectives. Then another one just as good. My mates Mike Fairbairn and Wynne, a couple of West London lads I'd known since our early teens, were in the crowd and they bought me a pint. We watched in awe from the bar. They grinned when Elvis sang the phrase, "Get your kicks at 66." Mike explained that it was a reference to number 66 Kings Road, where there was a posh squat, an empty house that a bunch of rich kids had occupied so they could live for free and throw wild drug parties every night. The beat was great, and Elvis had this way of stressing every syllable. They call her Natasha when she looks like Elsie. I don't want to go to Chelsea. I rather did want to go to Chelsea and meet someone called Natasha in a squat, actually. I didn't mention this to Mike, whose sister Leslie Fairbairn had been my sort of an on-off girlfriend ever since we were at school. I've been inside a few fancy squats before. It was all over the papers. The London wealthy were abandoning their property in the capital, or even leaving Brian altogether. to escape the high taxes imposed by Jim Callaghan's socialist government. There were some beautiful houses in the nice areas of London that had been left unoccupied, and many had been broken into and made into ham or no, into collective homes by marginalized young people. The pubs and venues in Fulham, Chelsea, and Islington were teeming with semi broke, unemployed youths looking for a great night out. In the mid 70s, England was poised on the verge of a cultural revolution. You could see it in the politics of the time, with the accumulated blunders of successive Labour governments playing right into the hands of Margaret Thatcher and her union busting Tories. You could feel it on the streets, in the radical fashions, the polarized attitudes, and the chaotic musical melting pots of Brixton, Camden Town, and Notting Hill Gate. For years, my circle of friends had been listening to bands like Supertramp and Genesis and Yes, but progressive rock had nowhere to progress to except up its own backside. Summer open air festivals in the UK featured the likes of the Allman Brothers and Little Feat. Chartered accountants were buying subscription to Rolling Stone magazine. Whether you were 17 or 35, your hair was long and shaggy, your trousers were flared. This left little room for angry youths to annoy their parents and make their presence felt. I distinctly remember the afternoon when a group of us were skipping off from school. We were in a cafe in Strutting Ground, smoking and sipping tea, when I walked Sean McGowan. Years later, he was to change the spelling of his name to Shane and become the frontman of the Pogues. Sean used to sit next to me in the back row of English lit class. At 16, he was already the gnarliest, skinniest, most unappetizing human being I'd ever laid eyes on. Yet, when he called upon to analyze a verse of Chaucer or a paragraph of Jane Austen, he was surprisingly astute. The rest of us always looked up to him when it came to matters of coolness and taste because Sean knew everything there was to know about modern music. On this particular afternoon, we had been debating the merits of the newly released Pink Floyd album, Wish You Were Here. Shane sat down at the table and lit a woodbine. We asked him what he thought of it. It's all crap, he mumbled through the stumps of his nicotine stained teeth. Floyd, the Beatles, the Stones, all rubbish. Their music is just old and stale, and so are they. They ought to be put to death. A collective gasp went around the table. We were so shocked we had to loosen our wonky school ties. How could Sean say such things about our most revered musical heroes? When my blood pressure finally lowered, I asked him, "Well, what should we be listening to, Sean?" He proceeded to spew out the names of bands I'd never heard of, presumably American, MC5, Iggy Pop, the Ramones, the New York Dolls, Johnny Thunders, and the Heartbreakers. It's the future, man. Sod all that corporate rock pep. The first time New Musical Express reviewed a Sex Pistols gig at the Marquee in early 1976. Oh, thank you, Jerry. Mm, mm. Oh, okay, where was I? 1976. Mm, mm. Their reporter was similarly scandalized. The lead singer, one Johnny Rotten, wrote the enemy scribe, snarled and swore at the audience, spat on the stage, then walked off in a huff after only 25 minutes. His band could barely tune their instruments. Who exactly do these Sex Pistols think they are? Within a few months, of course, the enemy were the shining champions of punk rock and everything it stood for. I spent much of my 18th year scanning its pages while grumbling about the out of touch Labour government and the stifling summer heat. I hung out on the King's Road and in Camden Market, waiting to discover that, exciting as it was to dress like a punk rock was really not for me. After yet another night of scrounged pints at the Red Cow, I walked all the way home to Putney and got up to the house on Schubert Road just before midnight. I squeezed past the prams and bicycles lining the corridor that smelled of curry, up 6 flights of stairs to my attic bedstead, the usual crap from the neighbors coming through the walls. On one side, Charlie Potts, the big band jazz band, playing Benny Goodman at high volume while he clapped and bumped around his room, scatting along to the brass section. On the other side, Melanie, she was seriously anorexic and rarely came out of her room. She groaned and sobbed whenever Charlie's music was too loud. Shut up, she kept wailing over and over again. My room was wedged between them, separated by thin plaster walls. I put up 50p in the meter to turn on the gas fire and opened up the wardrobe, which housed a single burner electric ring to make myself some baked beans on toast. Oh, wow. The place was fucking miserable, but at £12 a week, you got what you paid for. The only way to block out the din from the neighbors was to switch on my music, put on my Koss headphones, close my eyes, and sink into the grody armchair. I was broke, but at least I still had my music rig, a hefty ghetto blaster with a built-in cassette. I'd recorded last night's John Peel show off the BBC, Richard Hell and the Voidoids, Who Says, Janny Jones by The Clash, and a live version of Roadrunner by Jonathan Richman and the Modern Lovers. I rolled a joint and stayed up till about 2 a.m., jamming along on my Wurlitzer electric piano with its puny built-in speakers, wishing I had something with a bit more poke. I still got that cassette, and the date scrawled on it is October 11, 1977, a few days before my 19th birthday, which is a day I remember well. It got off to a bad start, but ended up being the best birthday ever. In the morning, I had to report down at the labor exchange. It was my third appointment, and they told me there were still no jobs listed in recording studios or road crews. Not that I expected otherwise. They pressured me to go for an interview at the pesticides division of Shell Oil. With my two A levels, they assured me I'd be a great fit for a job selling dog flea collars to Dubai. I kept telling the clerk it was a bad fit. I didn't even like dogs. He said, okay, but don't expect the dole checks to keep rolling in forever. On the way home, I took a shortcut along the river and swung by the back of the EMS shop. There was a garbage dumpster outside in the street. No one was around, so I heaved myself up and had a gander inside. A bunch of flattened cardboard boxes, an old fridge, and, hold on, a black metal box with lots of knobs. The guts were hanging out of it, but I could see the words Transcendent 2000 printed on the front. Somebody from the workshop must have thrown it in the dumpster. I thought, I'm having that, so I scooped the whole lot out and took it home. I found an AC cable, and to my amazement, the box turned right on. I didn't really know what it did, so I called Trevor, a bloke who worked at a shop called Macari's Music in the West End. Trevor always let me fool around in the keyboard room at the back, and he knew all there was to know about music gear. It's a synth module, you Wally, he said. A kit synth, DIY job. They print the plans in Popular Mechanics. You'll need a keyboard to play it, though, and some 8-volt per octave connectors, unless you just want to make noises. Just making noises was fine by me. I got out my soldering iron, opened up the Wurlitzer piano lid, and hooked the Transcendent to the whirly speakers with the bastardized guitar lead. At first, there was no sound, so I got it back off and had to fiddle around with the circuit board. Sometime in the early hours of the morning, I figured it out because there was no keyboard. You had to fake out the gate by sh- shorting out the 12V and the minus 12V and the plus 12V pins on the keyboard. 5 pin. Okay, what? 5 pins. Pins on the keyboard, 5 pin connector. I melted a blob of solder in there, and to my delight, out of the speakers came the drone of a sine wave. I instantly went for the knobs on the front panel. Yes, pitch, filter, waveform, white noise, and sample plus hold all working. I had an actual living synthesizer under my sweaty fingertips, and it was mine, all mine. Whoa, finders keepers. I was up half the night making all manner of bleeps and blips until around 6 a.m. when Melanie woke up and started groaning, "Shut up." I barely left my room for several days. There was a call from Mickey Potts, an Irish singer that Brian knew, and that finally persuaded me to take a break from doodling with my new synth module. He tipped me off about this amazing band that was playing in a basement club in Ladbroke Grove, Throbbing Gristle, with a support called Clock DV8. The place was packed out with spotty looking blokes and anoraks. Tending the bar was an ancient Rastafarian with thickly matted dreadlocks, his gold teeth glinting in the light from the beer pumps. There were a few punks milling around at the front, and the air was thick with body odor and cigarette smoke. The canned music cut off as Throbbing Gristle took the stage. Their maniac frontman had a little dictaphone tape recorder loaded with weird, chaotic noises, and he held it up to his mic, cupping his hands like a harmonica player. Projected behind them on the whitewashed brick walls were 8 millimeter film images of bombed out European cityscapes and vivisection experiments. I felt like I found my people. I recognized the guy that was mixing their sound. It was Simon, who had got me into the Nashville rooms to see Elvis Costello. I stood by him for most of the night, watching what he was doing with the knobs and faders. Between bands, I told him about how I found a Transcendent 2000 and got it working. Afterwards, I helped him coil a few cables and asked if he ever needed an assistant on a gig. He said to write down my phone number on a beer mat, but the evening ended up very sadly. Outside the club, I bumped into Mickey, Brian's singer friend from Dublin, who had missed the gig. He told me Brian had been crossing Mary Lebone Road when he was hit by a lorry. He was dead by the time they got him to the hospital. I sulked in my room for days. Brian was a lovely, kind-hearted bloke, and I realized how much I would miss our turn-up football tournaments and late-night electric bass sessions. I knew Brian was an only child, and somewhere his parents were grieving far, far more deeply. I never given much thought to whether my own parents worried about me living in a bedsit all alone in London. A week later, I pulled myself together and went out to see Television and Talking Heads at the Roadhouse. They were over from New York. At first, I thought they were one band, not two, because Talking Heads are on TV. Never mind, they were both utterly, utterly brilliant. Talking Heads came on first, and the singer looked like some sort of nervous, exotic bird, twitching his head approximately in time to the music, playing an edgy rhythm guitar and singing in a jagged, paranoid sweep. They had a blonde girl bass player who never took her eyes off the drummer for an instant, and the two of them were tighter than a duck's arse. Oh my god, this guy. Then Television came on, and in the chorus of the first song, It sounded like they were chanting, "Television don't go to my head." Clever to have a song with the same name as your band, like the Monkees. They had dueling guitar soloists, one of them very fluid and melodic, the other kind of raw and simplistic, like Neil Young, but completely spellbinding. This is nothing like punk rock, I thought, thank God, but it does have some of the same intensity and passion. I got home feeling totally inspired. I spent the whole night playing my keyboards, trying to piece my own songs together. I had some great bits, but they were just bits intros, verses, instrumental themes, fragments, really. It was fun, but frustrating as hell. In memory of Brian, I bought a packet of orange hair dye and a tube of gel from Boots and gave myself a spiky punk do. Over the next few months, I began helping Simon do a few sound mixing gigs, driving all over London in his beaten up Ford Transit loaded with PA gear. He only paid £5 a night, but it was a good laugh, and he usually let me work the faders for a bit while he went to the bar to try to pick up girls, which sometimes worked if he could convince them to stick around while we packed up the gear. Usually they just wanted to know where the band members were going after the gig. There was this flea pit of a hotel in Chalk Farm called the Cipriani that all the out-of-town bands ended up staying at. So long as you kept bribing the night porter, he would serve you vodka and gin miniatures in the lounge and endless packets of potato chips. One night I was at a gig at the Greyhound in Fulham Palace Road for a band from Swindon called XTC. They were absolutely effing brilliant. They came on with this manic punk energy that played at 1,000 miles an hour, but with actual chord sequences and interweaving riffs and melodies and insane lyrics about cross wires, the atom age, and song titles like I Set Myself on Fire. The lead singer hopped around the stage on one foot like a demented Chuck Berry, while his bass playing sidekick with the Beatle hairdo spun out these amazingly funky, minimalist bass parts. At one point, they went into slow, menacing song called I'm Bugged. On cue, over half the crowd put on their sunglasses and wrapped around in a termite-like mass. I'm bugged. You all look like insects in your brand new sun specs. They had an organist too, and God, I did want him dead. It's not that he was bad. Actually, he was great in a like deranged, a tonal sort of way, but I had a waking fantasy that he would go into cardiac arrest right there on stage, and XTC would have to ask for a volunteer out of the audience to take over the keyboards. Me. Simon got himself what he called a bit of posh toddy up in Hampstead Village. This girl, Becky, wanted him to go to her daddy's house in the country while her parents were away in Sardinia for the weekend. And he was thinking about letting me do a gig at Dingwalls for a band called the Members on Saturday night on my own. I was not insured to drive the transit, but I said I was willing to risk it. I definitely felt ready to set up the PA and mix a gig myself. It was only a punk band, and I reckoned it be a piece of cake. Rash words. The gig was almost a complete disaster. The headline band came on stage and announced they'd just been signed to Stiff Records, and it was their 2-year birthday party. The crowd was a mixture of the band's close friends, North London teddy boys, and football yobs in town for the Ipswich Town versus Arsenal Cup final. An explosive combo. Halfway through the set, the singer, Nikki Tesco's girlfriend, brought on a huge rectangular chocolate birthday cake she'd baked herself, lemon with raspberry jam filling and a chocolate icing, with the band's name in a huge pink icing letters. Nikki Tesco propped it up on the bass cab so the crowd could see it, and the band launched into their hit song, The Sound of the Suburbs. This, of course, was the cue for one of the oiks down the front to bum rush the stage and grab a handful of birthday cake, which he proceeded to hurl out to the crowd, triggering a general stampede onto the stage. In a few moments, the scene was like a custard pie fight from a Three Stooges movie. As I watched powerless from my mixing desk on the mezzanine, I could see cake splattering all over or rather Simon's PA stacks. Once all the cake was all gone and the band launched into their last song, finished with a crash, left the stage, and were wafted off into the night by a mob of jubilant Ipswich Town supporters, leaving me alone to clean up the mess. To my disgust, the grills of the onstage wedge monitor speakers were matted with desiccated coconut and chocolate icing. I cleaned them up as best I could, but the pub manager, who had no one else to take it out on, kicked me and my PA out before midnight. On the drive home, I had to keep a keen eye out for police cars not being insured. I didn't dare to risk leaving the PA in the van overnight, so I had to hump all the cabinets into the front hall corridor and stack them up to the ceiling, waking the baby in the ground floor flat, cue a torrent of abuse in Punjabi. I finally collapsed into bed and got up early to spend most of Sunday sponging the squashed birthday cake out of the speaker grills. Simon never had to find out about it, and when he got back from his steamy weekend in the country, he seemed pleased that I had pulled the gig off on my own. He said he was willing to let me do more of them using his PA and van, and we would split the money. He charged £100 a night, so that was 50 a pop for me, but he advised me to declare it to the dole office and go legit, which would mean no more weekly Social Security checks to cash, and I'd have to get proper insurance to drive the van. Still, if I could do 3 or 4 gigs a week, I might be able to save some decent money and buy new synth gear. On a balmy Saturday afternoon in July 1978, I bought myself my first proper synthesizer. It was a 1-year-old Micro Moog, 650 pound in a sale at Selmer's. I had to get it on hire purchase, but my mom agreed to co-sign for me. It was quite small and light, so I was able to get it home on the district line, wrapped in brown paper and string. The pitch bend ribbon was a bit worn. Other than that, it was in perfect condition. It was the first time I'd owned a keyboard with pitch bend, so I was able to start to imitate Chick Corea, who could sing solo like a lead guitarist. I sat on top of my other keyboard, a Solina string synthesizer, which 2 years later the Musicians Union voted to ban because it was taking jobs away from real string players. I also learned to double parts on 2 keyboards at the same time, like the guy from Weather Report. As my chops improved, I eyed the back pages of the Melody Maker for bands looking for synth players. I replied to a couple of ads. It was a hassle to get around with my gear because I couldn't always count on Simon letting me use the van, but I did go to one audition for a band called the Warm Jets, who said they were punks, though to me they sounded more like art school glam rock, like Roxy Music. It was in the back of a pub at the other end of London, and despite the very expensive two-way taxi ride, I didn't get the job. They said I knew too many chords. The fact was, the punk rock floodgates were open, and keyboard players were too posh. Most bands would have more been more into me if I'd said I was willing to trash my Wurlitzer on stage. They had a point. Years earlier, I'd seen Roxy perform on the BBC's late night stoner music show, The Old Grey Whistle Test. Their singer was a lithe and sexy crooner in a sharp suit, but their heavily made up synth player just stood at the back in a 7-inch heeled knee length lizard skin platform boots, arms folded, looking thoroughly bored. Every now and then he would lazily reach out a gloved hand to tweak a knob on his Moog, which was apparently playing itself. His name was Brian Eno. I thought to myself at the time, if all you have to do is pose around and twiddle a few knobs and meet girls and make bags of money, that's the career for me. That is the end of chapter 1. We pick it up on chapter 2 tomorrow. Skin tension under leatherette. I have no idea what that means, but hi. But I like this guy. His sounds very genuine. talks in his unique way, um, has a encyclopedic knowledge of music and instruments and the musicians, the industry, even in very um niche or like esoteric like new ways. Like so um that's it's that excitement of being so into something to give so much effort to it. Um he's not totally knowing where it's going, but I guess he's likes it. I think it's gonna be fun. And I know he's not just gonna stay there because I know in the prologue he was in like Nevada. So well, ducks are. Jeez. The ear for it naturally. Yeah. I don't know any of his music or anyone that he said. Um, but that's fine. I think it's still going to be fun. When they were saying about insurance, I kept thinking, Daryl told me last night, like for her to have your car, they could take all your tires, they could do your car, and you're on the hook. And part of me is like, wow, like I'm really scared. But then part of me is like, and I can't really do anything about it. So like, why be scared? And it's like essentially like, so why care? And like the why should be like, oh, because it matters. Like, but then ultimately, but then let's go back around to like, you can't really do anything. And so surrender to this. Um, like give in, give up to it. Because it's like why it's so sad. I feel like when I say like if I understand the gravity of how bad it is, I feel more depressed. If I care, I feel more depressed. Um, I'm very depressed. I'm sad, and I'm trying to not be. I'm trying to let go of caring about it, but l- if there's not like an end point, I suppose I've learned like of like okay, you don't care, and then like what after that? Where are you? What is this feeling? Is this better? Or you're like giving it up on life, and that's like makes me feel nauseous, but also it's better than being terrified when I am terrified. Um, I wish there was a way out of this, but I'm afraid there's not. And what can I control? So I will be here tomorrow. I can control if I have my channel being here tomorrow, and I will do that. Not much else that I can do. So, um, but I do love you, and I don't want you to worry about me. I don't want you to think I'm worth worrying about if there's nothing that can be done. You know what I mean? Anyway, good night.